Today I'm joined by Elisabeth Oehler, fellow strength and conditioning coach, national coach at the German Olympic Weightlifting Federation, head of talent ID at the German Weightlifting Federation. Welcome, Elisabeth.
Hello.
So today we have the rare case, two Germans speaking English with each other.
Yeah, kind of weird.
We want to test the patience of the audience. Elisabeth, how did you get into strength and conditioning?
It's actually quite a funny story because I was a coach before I studied sports science. Normally, I think it's the other way around. So while I was a student, I got into weightlifting. It was more like it was fun. I did a bit of CrossFit. I know that S&C coaches don't like that word, but I got into a CrossFit box and got involved into weightlifting, and then I kind of started to train more than it was actually ever planned. And I competed on national level in weightlifting, but like on a very an amateur level. And I always liked coaching people, and especially coaching kids, because you can change so much in their development. And I started coaching, like volunteer coaching kids in a weightlifting club, and I don't know, then a few opportunities arose, and I got a job at the German Weightlifting Federation. First I did just normal youth weightlifting work, and since last year I work as a talent ID coach or youth coach for German weightlifting, and I'm trying to find talented athletes for the federation.
What age group did you start?
So it's actually it depends. I try to find athletes as early as possible and get them into sport. Actually, in the first case, I don't care what sport they do. If they just come to weightlifting once a week, it's fine, and then they do other sports as well. So I try to assess what they're doing, and then see if they develop further or have athletic talent. So the youngest I have are between 8 and 10, and then I do a lot of crossover athletes, or I try to find crossover athletes that come from other sports and want to pursue a career in weightlifting, or maybe pursue a career in weightlifting because they've maybe not gonna make it in their sport. So weightlifting has a very late peak age, so you can start much later than probably in other sports.
So when does the talent ID stop? At what age? What are the oldest athletes?
So actually we have one athlete at the moment who's in the Olympic qualification process. She started at 25. She's 31 now. She's one of those rare athletes that finds the sport very late, but she has done heaps of sport before. But normally I stop when they're like 21. That's like probably the latest you can work as a crossover athlete. When you consider like the peak age is around 28, 29, then you have, when they're 21, you have like 7 to 8 years of development, and that's enough to make it to the Olympics.
Really interesting. In your coaching life, what was your darkest moment?
It sounds strange when I say there are a few, but for me, it's always there are very dark moments when I lose young athletes or when I have dropouts when they're very young due to I don't know, stress or overtraining or like issues that shouldn't happen. Like when I have a dropout due to lack of motivation, then I always ask myself, like, could I have done something different, or could I have maybe brought him into a different environment where he or she could have gained motivation again or whatever. So dropouts are probably my darkest moments.
How do you recover from these moments?
Well, I try to reflect and I try to think about what was my job in that, or what was my job as a talent ID coach or recruiter, and like what have I done wrong, and what have maybe the coach who trained with the athletes has done wrong. And then at the end of the day, you have to you can't you don't have reasons for everything, so, or you can't find reasons for everything. So if you have an athlete who drops out at like 16, 17, 18 due to a lack of motivation, then that's maybe sometimes how it is, and then you've got to move on, otherwise you overthinking it.
Yeah, you can only control what you can control.
Yes, right? Yes, and you can't look inside their brains, even though you sometimes want to do that, but you don't know what's going on, and they won't tell you everything. So sometimes it's just, okay, we have a dropout, this shouldn't happen, maybe reflect, but then move on.
What was your best moment?
The best moment is probably when I have an athlete who completely commits to my program. So well, I do program for other athletes out of weightlifting as well, like other sports, for example rugby. And when I have an athlete who completely commits and tells me after a season or after he has done the project for a certain time that it works, that he thinks it works, and that he wants to go on working with me, I think that's very rewarding. And when they start trusting your program and become very coachable, especially athletes that are very skeptic to S&Cs, I have that a lot with especially rugby players who have maybe S&C at their club. They don't really have a buy, or they don't really trust him, and then they try to do their own stuff, and then that doesn't really work out, and then they come to me and ask me, oh, can you write me a program, or I know you program for rugby players, and when they start like trusting it, or trusting the program, and want to go on working with me, that's quite like the nicest moments. Yeah,
that's pretty surprising. I always thought the S&C is quite in rugby. It's quite embedded into the sport.
Yeah, the S&Cs in rugby are very important because it's such a physical game. But I think it's very difficult for S&C in rugby to please a squad of 40 or 50 players. So you will always have players that don't commit to you, or don't commit to your program, or they've read something on the internet, what they think works better for them, or they just think they are so experienced. So if you have a big squad, I think there will always be a few who try to like find someone else, or find a different S&C, or they don't really commit to your program. Yeah.
If you could travel back in time 10, 15 years, what advice would you give a younger you?
I'm not that old yet.
No, that is true. I was thinking about that when I just said it.
Yeah, so I'm not that old yet.
I should have scripted it better.
Yeah. So 10 years ago, I was 18. Maybe I would have followed my passion a bit earlier. So when I was 18, I've done sports, and I've always been extremely interested in sports and very passionate about it, and like especially about the Olympics. And I still know that, like when I was like the Olympic Games in Sydney, for example, I remember that I sneaked out of my bedroom and watched every sport I could, and like I always was involved in sport, but when I was 18 and I just graduated school, I thought I'm gonna do something like more normal. And then I started studying something else that I was not really passionate about, and it took me too long to finally say, okay, I'm going to take that bigger risk and work in sports than doing what's maybe more secure and more safe for us, or has a steady income. And so if I would look back 10 years, I would say follow your or I should have followed my passion back at that age already, even though everyone around me was telling you can't work in sports. That's such a you won't have a steady income, it's not secure, don't do it, do something like that. Yeah, it's normal.
I had to hear the same things, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you remember of the 2000 Olympics?
Oh, the 2000 Olympics were the first one where women's weightlifting where women's weightlifting was introduced. So 2000 was like for weightlifters. There was like the big year where women's sport finally came on the big stage, and we had a German athlete, a female athlete there. I actually, I met her at the weightlifting club in Berlin, where I trained for a while, and it was quite an honor to meet someone who paved like, or who's responsible for that. Like, there are so many women in weightlifting now, so that's quite nice. Yeah.
Pirosh Dimas won his third Olympic title. I remember that. What advice would you give to young aspiring S&C coaches?
So since I'm still a young S&C coach, I just can, like, from my experience now, I would give the advice to gain as much experience as possible, especially to not stay in one sport, especially not like focus on one sport only and say, okay, if I want to work in football, I'm just going to focus on football. I'm trying to get an internship in football and just learn everything about football. I think that's not going to be that's not good as a young S&C coach. If you have a passion for one sport, that's a good thing, but it's always good to have to look around you and get out of your comfort zone. So what I have done the last few years is trying to gain as much experience as possible while shadowing other coaches. So I think it's better to travel somewhere and shadow another coach from a complete different sport than putting money into doing like the 10th or 11th certificate somewhere. So what I've done is like traveling and shadowing other coaches, and that's what I would recommend every other coach. And I think it's almost more important than focusing on the sports science studies part all the time. So rather use your free time or your money to travel and get as much experience as possible in other sports.
I agree. Yeah. You are a strength and conditioning coach and an Olympic weightlifting coach. How do you see the role of Olympic weightlifting in strength and conditioning?
It can play a very important role if the athletes you coach are able to perform the Olympic lifts, or if you work with young athletes. I'm not a fan, and I know that a lot of Olympic weightlifting coaches probably won't like what I'm saying, but I'm not a fan to let athletes, for example, in rugby or in football or wherever, and other sports, do snatches or clean and jerks when they haven't learned the techniques for a very long time. So I think it's a waste of time to teach a 23 or 24-year-old rugby player a snatch for power development, because that's a waste. It's really a waste of time, because they will never reach the weight you need to have power development. And the same with like jerk or clean and jerks, especially jerks. I don't see a reason or for any other sport besides besides Olympic weightlifting to learn a split jerk. It's sport specific skill for Olympic weightlifting. You don't need it in any other sport. And the reason why you do it is getting overhead strength, then that's the wrong exercise. If it's the reason you want to have like I don't know, upper body power. It's also, there are so many different exercises that are much easier and you can program. So I'm not a big fan of Olympic weightlifting in other sports, or the Olympic lifts in other sports. But if you have players who have been through an athletic development program, for example, when they were young, for example, they've been at a rugby academy and they learned the technique while they were, or from age 12 till age 18, then you can use the clean, of course. But it's not good or it's a waste of time to teach them when they already should just focus on their specific sport.
Yeah. And of course, every athlete is different, but what would you think would be a time span to learn the technique sufficiently in order to benefit at a later stage?
I think it always depends on, for example, overhead mobility, hip mobility, all that stuff. But for example, we plan in our long-term athlete development model for weightlifting, we plan 2 to 3 years for learning the techniques of the snatch and the clean and jerk. So that's for an Olympic weightlifter. He can learn the technique in like 2 to 3 years. You don't have that with any other athletes in S&C that time. And it's not useful to have I don't know, a 24-year-old basketball player or rugby player, or whoever, who does snatches with 40 kilograms. That's like not useful. Yeah. Because his technique is gonna, if you put on 50 kilograms, his technique is gonna get worse, and that's a waste of time.
Yeah, and how much do you get out of a 40-kilo snatch, right?
Yeah, nothing. Like, I think I can do that like at nighttime, and I'm a 50-kilogram girl.
Yeah. What is your coaching philosophy?
Well, I think what's the most important thing for me is to care about the players and the athletes. It's to care about not just their physical performance for their sport, but also like their personality and their personal development. For me, it's very important that like the way I coach, and because they spend a lot of time with me. As an Olympic weightlifting coach and as an S&C, you kind of spend a lot of time with the athletes. So for me, it's very important that they like develop to be like good and honest and real people. Besides like the physical performance part, that's probably my coaching philosophy. I'm trying to be like a good friend to them, and a good friend that also tells them the truth when it's needed. And yeah, that's kind of my coaching philosophy. I'm not someone who yells at athletes or tries to be like from the top down, and I don't do that. So I want to work with them and not tell them what they should do.
Does that change with different age groups, the approach?
Yeah, I think especially with the younger athletes, or especially between the age groups 12 till 17, you have to be a bit more strict, because otherwise they're gonna do whatever they want to do. But I think the role of being more a friend to them and like work with them, and their opinion should count, and they should reflect on what they're doing. They should understand what they're doing. I think it's very important in that age as well. But it's probably I probably sometimes come to a point where I say, okay, now this is not going to work. You do this now. You have to do this now, and just shut up. So that's in that age group. This happens quite sometimes. Yeah.
You are certified youth strength and conditioning coach as well. What are the similarities between strength and conditioning for youth athletes and mature athletes, and what are the differences?
I'm gonna start with the differences because it kind of in the sports world it happens quite a lot that SNCs or sports coaches in general treat kids and young athletes like grown-ups. So they basically train the same exercises, they have the same structure of a program, but they do just a bit less. And I don't think that's the right approach. Well, kids, so we come to the similarities, or no, it's actually differences. So kids can train much more. They can train much higher volume but very low intensity, especially the age groups from like 6 to 12, 13. In those age groups, you can basically, they can do like extremely high volume, but very, very low intensity when it comes to weight training and stuff like that. And they benefit quite a lot from high volume. So you see a lot of progression and when they train high volume. And you can be, I think, in youth strength and conditioning, you should be able to get out of your sport specific comfort zone. You can do a lot of different exercises. You can try to teach them a lot of techniques. You can, even if, for example, I'm working weightlifting, but I do a lot of I don't know, basketball skills, football skills, whatever with them to improve coordination or whatever. I'm not a fan of early specialization, so I'm trying to have like a huge variety. And the more the older they get, the more specific they can train. It's actually, I think it's way more fun to train with those age groups, or because you can, I don't know, do a lot of experiments and you won't harm them. Yeah. And you can play a lot of games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Some beliefs never die. Tell us your opinion about strength training for kids. Is it detrimental? Is it dangerous? What's your answer?
It's not dangerous, otherwise I wouldn't do it. Definitely I wouldn't do it. And I don't know why this is still a thing in sports. Like, sports science is pretty clear. Strength training for kids, as long as you don't overdo it, is pretty beneficial in so many ways. I think there are hundreds of studies that prove that strength training for kids is pretty beneficial. So I don't know where this still comes from, especially from sports coaches. Like, and sometimes I feel that S&C coaches are way more educated than sports coaches. And you have to discuss with like a football or a basketball coach about strength training with kids, and you think like, okay, I don't know, have you done anything at university? Like, strength training for kids, it's like, that's not even a discussion anymore. It's like, that's good for them. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for your answer. What are your core values?
Probably, my core values are what I said at the beginning. I'm very passionate about my athletes, and I'm very passionate about them becoming better. Honesty, even though sometimes that hurts, whereas like brings you in not so nice situations, but honesty, and I would say commitment. I expect commitment from athletes, and they can expect commitment from my side. So I would say these three. It's like passion, commitment, and honesty.
Oh, cool. Which person has influenced you most and why?
So I would say two people that are extremely important for my, like, for why I'm still doing S&C, or why I finally got into S&C and weightlifting. First of all, it's my old weightlifting coach. He has brought a lot of athletes to Olympic Games. He won a few medals at the Olympics. He's over 70 now, and he's still coaching. And I think everything I learned about weightlifting, I learned from him, like biomechanics and programming, and what it takes to bring someone to the Olympics, because he has brought so many to the Olympics, and has quite some experience. And
let's give him some credit. What's his name?
His name is, I say like Mr. Feser. His name is Rolf Feser. He's the former coach of Oliver Caruso. And he was a former head coach of the German weightlifting national team. But that's like a long, long time ago. Okay. And he's now over 70, but he's still squatting. So actually, like, it was last year we did, it was last year, I think, we did a squat challenge. So and he squatted 100 kilograms in his jeans and said, okay, I can still do it. And like, I could take, we took a lot of hours doing video analysis of lifts. We watched all competitions of the last probably 10 years. On YouTube, and he tried to teach me so much about technique and programming, and he's probably the most organized coach I know. So I can ask him what has athletes whatever done in 1997 on that day, and then he goes into his library and finds the program of exact that day. And that's pretty impressive. So that's the first person. And the second one is, I would say there are a few. It's mainly those women or these female coaches that just followed their passion and went into a sport they just like. I don't like saying they went into a male dominated sport. For example, Katie Sowers now, she's the first female American football coach who coached in the Super Bowl. They just did whatever they want to do and followed their passion into their favorite sport, and didn't care about that this is like a male dominated sport. So, and I like these kind of women are like supporting my way, or supporting me in working in sports that I just like, even though there are not a lot of women.
Really cool. So you are the head of talent identification. How does the talent identification in the Olympic Weightlifting Federation look like? Just give us a rough outline.
So we do assessments. We start when they are around like 12, 13. We do like some basic assessments for like power, strength, mobility, whatever. And then we retest them again. And it's basically what I'm looking for is more athletic talent, or I call it athletic talent. So do they have like the fundamental or the base to become good in sports in general? I wouldn't say we do specific talent ID for weightlifting. Of course, there are a few things that show that are more probably more in weightlifting than in other sports. So if someone is extremely tall, we can't really need them for Olympic weightlifting. But I try to do assessment and try to figure out, does this kid even have like the base or the fundamental skills to like develop into an Olympic athlete.
Yeah, I saw that in one of your LinkedIn posts. You talked about testing motor skills. What kind of motor skills are you testing?
Yeah, so I try to, or I let them sprint, I let them throw. Then I have a med ball backwards throw, like that's kind of the triple extension that we want to have in a lift, a vertical jump. Then I do like a mobility assessment for hip mobility and shoulder and ankle, and that's basically it. Like there's not more that I can need in that in those age groups. I would like to do more. I would like to do not just motor skill assessments or testings. I would like to do also like the psychological side of talent ID, but it's very, very difficult when you don't want it to influence your like selection process.
Yeah.
And I always have a very, very hard time to select athletes in a very young age, because I think they can still develop, and I try to select as late as possible.
Yeah. A lot of things have been said about the relative age effect in last years. Is that something you take into consideration?
Yes, definitely. So, for example, this year for the first time, or not for the first time, but we did it this year and also the last year with the German youth national team. We have like a standard weight they have to hit. For example, in a weight class, they have like they have the standard. They need to do like a total of 145 in the 59 kilogram female weight class, and in like the age or the age group below, they have like a lower weight, and we take the biological age for seeing what like standards they should hit, or what standards they need to become a national team athlete. I don't think a lot of other sports do that. So, for example, even though they compete in the age group 16, if their biological age is like 15 or 14, and we take that standard for the national team.
Yeah, that leads perfectly into the next question,
Yeah.
talking about LTAD, long-term athlete development.
Yeah.
So you work with chronological age, biological age, and different phases of development. How does
training age.
Okay. So how does the LTAD framework look like, more or less? Just what age do you start and where does it end?
Well, it would be ideal for us or for weightlifting if we get athletes at the age of like 13, 14 who have done, or who have a very good, or who have a lot of sports experience in different kind of sports, so that have the motor skills or especially the coordinative skills that we need. Since that's mainly not the case, So most athletes who come to us with 13, 14, they haven't done a lot when they were younger. We started our long-term athlete development model or program, whatever you call it, a lot younger. So we already work with 8 till 10-year-olds and try to do like what school doesn't do anymore, like teach them fundamentals, movement skills. Otherwise, we can't need them for high performance sport later. If they haven't done this phase, we can't need them. We can't use them later for like elite sports. So we start at the age of 8 till 10. We introduce them to weightlifting technique already. So most 10-year-olds, they are able to do snatches with like a broomstick or a PVC pipe or whatever. They do overhead squats with it. They do split jerks with it. It's like techniques they're gonna learn. But the rest is like I would say 80% of the training is basically fundamental movement skills, a lot of and playing games. When they are around 13 or when we have like PHV, then we start strength training. And then we try to see how they respond to it, and then it depends on the individual, how much volume he needs or she needs, how much intensity she can or he can handle, and then we go up. But like it would have been better if we could just start working in weightlifting with them when they are a bit older, but a lack of the skills that we need. So we got to start early with them.
And you mentioned PHV. So you start the loading process or higher intensities post PHV?
We try during PHV, or we start strength training during PHV.
Okay.
And then they try and the intensities get higher and the volume less, like post PHV.
Yeah. So without putting words in your mouth, but I hear you want to have the basic techniques consolidated prior PHV, yes, and then be able to load it.
Yeah, it would be perfect if they have already learned the techniques. You don't need to learn techniques loaded. It's fine if they know how to snatch with a broomstick or an empty barbell. That's completely fine. Then that's like the perfect base to do strength training then during and post PHV.
Yeah. And in the last years, we've heard a lot about the multilateral athlete, and meaning successful athletes have participated in more than 3 sports when they were young. And you also mentioned you would like to see more athletes participating in different sports. What sports do you think would be beneficial for weightlifting? Where do you see the highest transfer?
First of all, I think that's for every sport, or for probably every sport, if you have like a gymnastics background, if you've done gymnastics as a kid, you have like the basic, or you have the foundation to almost make it in any other sport, maybe besides those sports where you need to be extremely tall or whatever, like basketball, for example. But if you have done gymnastics as a kid or a young athlete, you have a pretty good base for high performance sport later. I'm a big fan of those sports, or of sports like wrestling or judo, or if you take athletics, then the throwers, for example, they have basically the same like physical profile that weightlifters have. And you have, if you see at the world stage now, and especially in the US, a lot of especially female lifters have been gymnasts before or have done another sport. and then make it in weightlifting even at a very late age, or they transfer to it at a very late age. So I try to have cooperations with like wrestling or judo or gymnastics or athletics, and try to find athletes in those sports that want to transfer to weightlifting.
Okay. How does a typical day in the life of an S&C coach look like, or in a talent ID coach?
It probably sounds so boring, but I spend a lot of time in the office, especially because talent ID is also a lot of analysis. It's a lot of you collecting a lot of data, and then you obviously have to analyze them. And I do, for the German Weightlifting Federation, I do a lot of conceptual work or strategic work. So I'm writing concepts, and I'm trying to be there for the coaches who train in the or coach the athletes in the high performance centers. So that's like a normal, there would be like an essence, or would be a weightlifting coach office day. A weightlifting coach or talent ID coach, actual talent ID day would be I'm driving to different high performance centers and do talent assessments in cooperation with schools or with other sports, or and try to collect data and then make decisions as well. And I try to have a good contact, or try to have good contact to the coaches and the athletes that I kind of found some way. And I try to monitor a bit of their progression, and try to be to see, or try to support the process of talent development at the end of the day. And yeah, that's my day job. And my night job is probably programming for rugby players or programming for other athletes. So I think kind of if you're S&C in general, you're kind of a workaholic. And so yeah, that's what I do on Sundays and at nighttime. Trying to get rugby players fit and strong, and most of the time try to get them returned to the game because they get injured a lot.
How do you design a training program?
First of all, it always depends on the athlete, depends on the sport. I have, first of all, with the younger athletes, or with the kids, or I'm gonna call them kids now, with the kids, I don't design that much, especially the younger age groups. I have a specific goal for a period of time, for example 4 till 6 weeks. I say, okay, we want to learn a few specific skills for weightlifters, for example, or for weightlifting kids group. I say, okay, we're going to learn a handstand against a wall, or we learn have a stable overhead position, and then I try to find exercises and especially games for them to learn that specific skill for a period of time, and then I try to get a lot of variety into the programs with kids. So I change exercises probably all the time, and try to give them like a new impulse all the time. And that changes the older they get. So then it will be way more structured. And the older kids or young athletes, they probably don't like to be called kids. Then they get like a normal training plan. I always start with like a technique exercise, for example, snatch or snatch balance, or I don't like overhead squats that much when they're older. It's nice for warm up, but not as a main exercise. Then I do after the technique part, I do the strength part. So it's going to be squats, pulls, normal strength work, and then at the end of and a lot of accessory work. That will be for weightlifter. For a rugby player or football player or basketball player, it always depends on what position they play, what are the demands of their sport, but I think I follow a basic structure. I always start with like a movement prep prehab stuff, because I actually program this, because otherwise I wouldn't do it. And I know when they are not getting done in a specific time, or if they're done too early, then I know they skipped the prehab stuff, because my programs are timed normally very well. Mm-hmm. And then I do like a main upper body or lower body exercise, and then a lot of accessory work and core work around it. That's probably the basic structure, and then it always depends on the position. For example, in rugby, you have 15 different positions, and all of those positions have different demands. So I train a forward, like a prop that's like in the front row doing scrums, trains very different from like a backline player who just needs to be fast and sprint. So yeah, that's always that would be like my kind of programming.
Cool. Do you want to nominate someone to be interviewed?
You want to have a German SNC or whoever?
Who you consider to be interesting?
Okay, it's Julia. Julia works in or Julia. Her name is Julia Oehler. She is a female coach in football. A sports psychologist and SNC coach, and she has a very interesting views on football, and she's a good SNC for football that is very different from all the other football SNCs that I've met.
Okay, what's the name? Julia?
Julia Oehler. I will send you her full name.
Really cool. What else is going on in your life at this moment in time?
So at the moment it's Corona all over, I think. So we are in Olympic qualification process with our senior athletes, and it's all, we have different news every day what's going to happen now, and I think at the moment we all kind of work together to make this to make the Olympics probably successful. Otherwise, I'm going to have a youth training camp in France next month if Corona doesn't cancel it. So yeah, that's what I'm working on. And yeah, what else am I doing? Still have a few rugby players that I program for, and see how their season's gonna end. We don't know yet. Yeah, that's what's going on at the moment.
And you're a part-time student.
And I'm writing my bachelor thesis at the moment. I say this, if you're SNC, you are kind of a workaholic. And you always recommend to your athletes that they should sleep at least 8 hours. And as an SNC, you never do that.
It'll change once you're older.
Yeah.
You have to.
I hope so.
Where can people find you?
I'm on Instagram, Oisa, so OH and then Isa, and on LinkedIn, and I have an email and I have a website. It's eo-performance.com, and yeah, you find my contact details there.
Elisabeth, thanks for your time.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.